The loudest sound I ever heard wasn't thunder. It was the silence after the roof stopped leaking. That probably doesn't make sense yet. It didn't make sense to me either until I was 86 years old and standing in an empty living room, listening to a house that had finally stopped asking me to stay. If you stay with me, I'll tell you why I spent 17 years protecting a home that no longer needed protecting. I lived in the same white farmhouse for 57 years. I painted every room at least 3 times, planted 27 rose bushes, and watched 3 generations celebrate birthdays around one oak dining table. I believe I was preserving a family legacy. I was really preserving my fear. My husband, Thomas, built the front porch himself in the summer of 1968. He wasn't a carpenter. He was a mechanic. The steps weren't perfectly level. One railing leaned just a little. Every visitor noticed. Thomas would grin and say, "It keeps people humble." After he died, I refused to change a thing. The crooked railing stayed. His old workshop stayed exactly as he left it. Even his worn gardening gloves remained hanging on the same rusty nail for 16 years. People called it sentimental. They were being polite. It was grief wearing comfortable clothes. Every year my children asked the same question. "Mom, have you thought about moving somewhere smaller?" I always smiled. "And leave this place? It's getting harder for you." "I'm managing." The conversation ended there. At least on the surface. Inside, I was furious. How could they ask me to leave the house where our children took their first steps? Where Thomas kissed me in the kitchen every morning before work? Where Christmas mornings smelled of cinnamon and pine needles? Didn't they understand? The house wasn't wood and brick. It was my whole life. Or so I believed. At 82, climbing the stairs became slower. At 83, I stopped using the upstairs bathroom because the trip felt too long. At 84, I quietly closed off 2 bedrooms I no longer had the energy to clean. Still, I insisted everything was fine. Visitors only saw the tidy kitchen and bright living room. They never saw the dust gathering in forgotten corners. The truth is, the house had quietly become too large for one heartbeat. But pride can be surprisingly heavy. One October afternoon, my grandson Daniel came to clean the gutters. When he climbed down the ladder, he looked worried. "Grandma, the roof needs replacing. It has another few years." He shook his head. "It doesn't." I thanked him for worrying. Then ignored his advice. Replacing the roof seemed impossible. Not because I couldn't find the money. Because admitting the roof was failing felt like admitting I was too. Winter passed. Spring arrived. Then came the storm. The rain began just after midnight. At first it sounded comforting. Then I heard a slow drip, drip, drip. I placed a bucket beneath the leak. 5 minutes later another leak appeared. Then another. Water spread across the hallway floor. The lights flickered once. Twice. Then darkness. I stood there holding a flashlight with shaking hands. For the first time in my life, I was afraid inside my own home. Not of burglars. Not of strangers. Of the house itself. I called my son at 2:14 in the morning. I almost hung up before he answered. I hated asking for help. "Mom?" His voice was instantly awake. "The roof." That was all I managed to say. 25 minutes later, he arrived with his 2 sons. They covered furniture, moved boxes, placed tarps across the attic, worked until sunrise. I sat wrapped in a blanket, feeling completely useless. Around 6 o'clock, my oldest grandson handed me a mug of coffee. He sat beside me on the porch. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he looked toward the damaged roof. "You know, Grandma." "What?" "We're not trying to take your home away." "I know." "No." He smiled gently. "I don't think you do." I looked at him. He continued. "We're trying to make sure we don't lose you because of it." I looked back at the house. For years I had believed I was protecting these walls. In truth, my family had been trying to protect me. A month later, my daughter invited me to visit a small cottage near her home. "I just want you to see it. I don't need another house." "I know. Humor me." The cottage had a tiny garden. 1 bedroom. A wide front window. And a porch. Not as large as Thomas had built, but just big enough for 2 rocking chairs. I hated how much I liked it. I spent 3 months arguing with myself. Every room in my old farmhouse seemed to ask me to stay. Every creaking floorboard whispered another memory. Then one afternoon I walked into Thomas's workshop. His gloves still hung on the nail. 16 years. Without thinking, I picked them up. They had become stiff with age. The leather cracked as I bent the fingers. I suddenly realized something. Thomas had never loved this house because it stayed the same. He loved it because we kept filling it with life. The walls were never the treasure. The people inside them were. I sat down on his old workbench and cried. Just once. Quietly. The farmhouse sold the following spring. On the morning I left, I walked through every room. I touched the kitchen counter where our children rolled cookie dough. I stood by the bedroom window where Thomas had watched snow fall every winter. I paused at the crooked porch railing. Then I smiled. I didn't take the railing. I didn't take the old wallpaper. I didn't even take every piece of furniture. I only took what truly mattered. Photographs. Thomas's wedding ring. The blue quilt my mother made. And those worn gardening gloves. Today they hang beside my back door. Not because I need to remember the house. Because they remind me of the man who filled every house with love. I've learned that memories don't live inside buildings. They travel quietly inside the people willing to carry them. Sometimes we cling so tightly to yesterday that we leave no room for tomorrow to sit beside us. If you're holding on to something because you're afraid letting go means forgetting, ask yourself one gentle question. Are you protecting a memory? Or are you protecting your fear of living without it? There is a difference. I know that now. Every evening, I sit on my little porch with a cup of tea. Children ride bicycles down the street. Neighbors wave. My daughter stops by without calling because she only lives 5 minutes away. The farmhouse gave me 57 beautiful years. This little cottage is giving me something different. More time with the people who made those 57 years worth remembering. And sometimes, when the wind catches the porch railing just right, I can almost hear Thomas laughing. It still leans a little. Just enough to keep me humble.